Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. I hope whichever session you're in, you found it to be fun and informative. We're back on track now with timing and going to work hard to keep there. So our next session is the SWOT, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis of AWP and Lean together. This is a culmination of a lot of the work that the joint working group has done throughout the year. So I think it's really going to be exciting to hear what gets shared and how this is coming together. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to, I believe we have Eric and Sean, who are going to be leading this.
Thanks, Kristen. Yep, Eric, Crivella, and Nigel Harper joining us with Sean supporting in the moderator role.
Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Excellent.
It's in the edit view, not the, yeah, there you go. You're all good.
Excellent. All right. Well, Eric Crivella, Digital Construction Works. Honored to be presenting with Nigel Harper from Integrated Project Delivery. We're going to go quickly through a bit of, we have a lot of content today. So we cover the SWOT, the frame and the background to it, and jump into some case studies. I'll go first with a Lean or with an AWP case study, and then into a Lean one from Nigel. Then at the end, we'll bring it all together and leave some time for Q&A as we go along here. I am thrilled to have so many wonderful companies and organizations represented in the joint working group and marching forward with this at the summit here. This is really important work in terms of bringing these together. I'm quite thrilled with this. As we kind of formed the joint working group coming out of, Fernando had mentioned it earlier, but Dr. Jorge Venegas, who's a longtime friend and advisor, made an introduction to Zofia at Texas A&M and said, hey, you have to connect the dots between Lean and AWP. And we did just that. So we had several sessions with Zofia. And Fernando was organizing it. Fernando Espana has a foot in both camps, right? So he's done a lot of work in the past on the Lean side of it, and has been a very big proponent of AWP and over the past several years. And so he kind of brought everything together with Zofia, and that's how the joint working group got up and going there. So we're thrilled to have this going forward and to talk about it, right? One of the key concepts within the joint working group is understand and bridge the gap between AWP and Lean on the communities and the best practices. How do we make this happen, right? So one of the big initiatives within the group was really to start this SWOT analysis. And we focused on not only the strengths and the weaknesses, we did pay less attention to the threats, and the opportunities should come out of this and be obvious as we march forward with this. So on the Lean side of it and the strengths, right, there was a practitioner group within the joint working group, did several sessions where they had breakout sessions with each, the AWP and the Lean folks all getting together to look at it and really go through this SWOT analysis in terms of looking at it from both sides of it, trying to sort out what's the strengths and weaknesses and where's the opportunities here. At the end of the day, at a very, very high level, Lean has a wonderful culture of respect for people and continuous improvement, and very flexible and proven tools and techniques. The last planner system, integrated project delivery, target value delivery, Kaizen. And it seems like they have a great emphasis on getting involved earlier and starting that collaboration much earlier. And of course, Lean has a very well-established community and a very passionate set of academic and practitioners that are really making it happen. So a long history of that. On the AWP side of it, a very structured and repeatable process. related to the path of construction and work packaging. And then a very rigorous and disciplined constraint management throughout the whole life cycle really distinguishes it. And then one of the points of difference that I see as a strength for AWP is the dedicated workface planners that are integrated across, that integrate across the stakeholders and really cater to the foreman out in the field, right? And allow them to free up their time to be at the workface and to manage their crews out in the field by taking a bit of the planning burden off of the foreman out in the field, but in coordinating on all the constraint management, so only constraint-free work packages get released out to the field. Another big strength on the AWP side of it is it lends itself quite well to the digital initiatives, the BIM, VDC, design for manufacturer assembly, AI, machine learning, etc., and collaborative and smart contracts. So there's some really good strengths here. On the common strengths, we have early collaboration and understanding of the project through interactive planning and visual project management. And of course, Lean also espouses constraint management throughout the process and the life cycle, as well as short-range production planning and control. But that's not just a Lean thing. The short-range production planning and workface planning aspects of that is also a shared common strength also with the AWP community, right? Both methodologies have really demonstrated tremendous productivity and predictability improvements. And of course, there's an emphasis on flow, right? And being able to, the workflows that are coming through there, certainly more on the Lean side than AWP, but there is an emphasis on how do you take this and do this out of packaging and really support the field supervision with work that's executable. So it really does enhance the PM framework. We leverage the tool. We share similar community type of passionate community and a desire to automate things and orchestrate them through technology. So those are some of our common strengths. So on the weaknesses side of it, I'm not the one that really should be presenting any sort of weaknesses on the Lean side of it. But there's a perception that the practitioners came up with as part of this SWOT analysis that Lean is a set of tools, complex tools, instead of a holistic project delivery process. So perhaps not enough systems thinking, and perhaps not enough consistency in terms of the standardization of the deliverables and consistency of the implementations. And perhaps that causes some of the supply chain issues and challenges in adopting Lean on more projects and throughout more of the project, not just one or two folks within a project, stakeholders actually using the Lean techniques and methodology. On the AWP side of it, we have, there's, I won't say it's a terrible weakness, but it's in comparison to Lean, we don't have quite the same culture, and we don't have the same respect for people and continuous improvement, or the sociology aspects, if you will, right? And we don't have a huge community of people that have been doing this for years and years. We have a good size community of people and experts and champions, but not nearly as big as our friends on the Lean side of it, right? And we also struggle with the same issues of supply chain adoption. Certainly, there's not much collaborative contracting really being done in the AWP community yet, right? And one of the other weaknesses here is that we still have to figure out a couple of big rocks that need to be moved in terms of vendor documentation, vendor work packaging, and integrated materials management. So certainly areas for improvement on both sides of the fence there. But both Lean and AWP typically require owner engagement in order to be successful. Unless the owner really drives this into the supply chain, puts it into their contracts, mandates it, you only get what you get, right? So it gets a lot better when the owner is engaged and fully on board with it. So at the heart of it, the practitioners in coming up with the SWOT analysis, really attributed the differences is at a cultural level and at a language level, right? That's the core of the conflict. But conceptually, we can see where Lean offers a lot in terms of on the people sociology aspects of it, and a library full of wonderful tools and techniques in order to really make improvements on capital projects. AWP brings to the table, a rigorous framework for the process, a process framework, if you will, that really lends itself quite well to digital technology. So conceptually, these two kind of go together pretty well with a bit of a yin and yang type of approach, right?
We're going to prove that out, Eric, yeah?
Absolutely. Do you want to comment on that?
No, you're good. Keep going, you're good. Okay.
So look, at the end of the day, the frame that we've come up with is really looking at, okay, how Lean has this, reduce the waste, add value, using continuous improvement and developing a culture of respect. And AWP kind of builds upon that and says, okay, let's put a structured framework to that, and take advantage of these agile and lean concepts, and then simultaneously leverage the technology to really optimize a capital project. So these two really belong together. If you ask us, Nigel and ourselves here, it's not just, hey, this toolkit or that toolkit. How do you bring these together, right? And so it was kind of funny that a couple of weeks ago that when there was a joint working group meeting, and we had a colleague that was referencing how do these fit together, and there was a bit of a frame to that, right? So Deming talks about, hey, it's not the people. Most of the time, it's the systems and the processes that are the failure, and it's our role as management to do a better job in putting in place the systems and the processes to make that happen. People don't come to work and not, want to do a bad job. People come to work and fundamentally want to get stuff done and feel good about what they've done. And so I think that Lean and AWP really shares this, and this kind of adding a level of process and structure and standardized deliverables and technology, combining that with what Lean has in terms of the tools and the culture and the kind of the aspects of the sociology of that, really makes for a kind of an interesting, hey, who put their chocolate in my peanut butter, which was exactly how John Strickland described it a couple weeks ago in one of our joint working group meetings. And I just thought that was such a great positioning of, hey, these are two really good things. And when you combine them together, they're even better, right? So I love this analogy. And going forward, it's, typically it's not one size fits all approach, right? So when you're talking about digital ecosystems and bringing all these stakeholders together, it really does take a mixing board of the tools, the techniques, the contracts, the people, the education, bringing all that together and fine tuning it specifically for that project in that particular segment, et cetera. So it's not just one tool in the tool bag there, but it's a variety of them. And then how do you tweak them for the specific project, right? So it's not a one size fits all. It's how do I pull in the right levers and do the right dials in order to get this project the right way? But how do I expand my toolbox to include other capabilities along these lines? So this is kind of the flavor that we have here in terms of, it's not one size fits all. How do you tweak it for a specific project and specific segments? And a bit of a case study along these lines from the AWP perspective. So this is an Alberta oil sands related project infrastructure related projects, in which they had a $400 million project, and they had split it up into two, where they had one side of it was going to use AWP, the other was not. And, about 1 million man hours worth of effort on the project. And they really want to use AWP in order to look at it from a constraint management early on, right? And link together the various project IT systems, do the work packaging, and get that down into doing the constraint analysis as it goes out to the crews out in the field. So on this particular project, right, so with the portion of it that was split up and that didn't use AWP was about $100,000 over budget. On any day on a $400 million project, if you're just $100 over, that's pretty much a win. But look at this, on the portion of the project that actually used AWP, they saw a 10% improvement, right? Of $40 million worth of savings. They squeezed the waste out of it, and they went above and beyond, and then witnessed not only better on the savings and on the productivity, on the schedule, but also on the safety. So before releasing work out to the field, they made sure they had everything had been bagged and tagged, scaffold supports, etc. Scaffold, somebody had looked at each one of those work packages from a safety perspective before it was released out to the field. I don't know definitively if that made the difference between 12 incidents on one side and 0 on the other, but certainly with AWP, that's a key part of it from a safety perspective, right? But on this project, they saw 25% improvement in field productivity. How'd they get there? Largely they got there through using the AWP process, right? So looking at the path of construction, breaking that up, taking your areas. I'm going to do it from north to south, east to west, however you define your path of construction, and then breaking that down and saying, okay, at the path of construction, I'm going to break that down into construction work packages that are going to be fed by engineering work packages, procurement work packages, and other related information coming from vendor related equipment information, scaffold, access management type of packages / reporting. With the idea being that I'm going to create these CWPs at an area and discipline level, and before they're released out to the field, I'm going to make sure that I have all those constraints satisfied. So only the work that is constraint-free is released out to the field and put into these installation work packages, which typically represent a rule of thumb in terms of some engagement, breaking it up into smaller increments, a week or shifts worth of work or whatever makes sense for that specific discipline, but to break that up into more manageable chunks and to make sure that it's constraint-free before it's released out to the field, right? So that work phase planning aspects of it, but really a rigorous constraint management as you go along. So this is how they squeeze the juice out of it. But from an organizational perspective, it's, work phase planning and advanced work packaging requires additional resourcing. Typically, these resources are on the project already and they're doing that, but they don't have this formalized role. So in AWP, we formalize this role of a work phase planner that is able to help and create the packages, but do it in a subservient manner to the field supervision and the general foreman and the foreman out in the field. Specifically, you want the foreman to own the packages, but you want to clear a path for them. You want to cater to them. You want to take away any burden in terms of creating these packages and going forward. So the work phase planner and the AWP coordinators are really subservient to the foreman and the general foreman out in the field in order to make their lives easier and doing the work packaging and the constraint analysis and the field-based coordination that it takes to put a short-range production planning system in place on a project. So key roles. Then there's another couple key roles of virtual construction model administrator. So this is the equivalent of a PIM, a project information manager, but looking at it more from specifically a virtual construction model. So being able to have the 4D, 5D, the XD, a virtual construction model of the facility being built and being able to show it. Here was the plan versus the actual versus the as is, and keeping that evergreen and up to date, as well as this virtual construction model administrator, the VPM admin, being able to do the level of integration that it's necessary in order to look at it from an area basis and make a transition into systems and the turnover and the various work package types. So it's really a core of three roles that really facilitate work-face planning and advanced work packaging on a project. That's the champion, an AWP champion, a construction manager, a work-face planner, and the virtual construction model administrator, right? So you need somebody that's actually going to work, do the IT side of it, somebody that understands it from at a champion level, and then the work-face planner, the manager of the work-face planners. That those three key roles are necessary in order to make this happen. But again, it's not necessarily that you have to add these roles, you have to formalize those roles. These people are on your project already in many instances. They require specific role-based training, and they, a structure related to it. There's planning that's going on in the projects. There's work packaging that's going on. It's often not as disciplined and rigorous as when you add in the roles here and have the very defined roles along those lines. Another key concept in terms of on the AWP side of it is on the technology side and the use of data requirements and digital threads in order to drive things and do the interoperability. There was a recent study just come up with a number of $1.8 billion lost in interoperability or bad data on our construction projects. Whatever the number is, it's large, and we need to do a better job of connecting the dots and connecting the dots between our various project IT systems to keep it up to date and to allow that interoperability so we can actually have more real-time feedback coming from the field to make better decisions. And to do that in such a way that if you get this right and you get the data the right way up front and you get it into your supply chain and you talk to your vendors the right way and get out of them the attribution and the data that you require, not only can you be more effective in your project execution, but simultaneously you can deliver a construction digital twin that can then feed a performance digital twin going forward to support the life cycle of the project into operations and maintenance. So getting the data requirements and the digital threads, just getting that right is a big deal in order to really make this happen. So this is one of the key aspects of doing this. Another really critical aspect of this is looking at it from, value scenarios. So this is a tool that was developed by our friends at ConstructX and then donated to the the AWP CBA, the Community and Business Advancement. This is a tool that looks at it from a capabilities assessment and value scenarios. So it really looks like, so if I have a priority of executing constraint-free work packages out in the field, what benefits does that provide me? What does that mean? Kind of crystallizing on the various priorities that I would have or an organization would have from a value scenario perspective and what benefits that they want to get out of it. And you combine that and you say, that's the value scenario. I want to execute constraint-free work packages out in the field. Well, what all does that mean? Well, certainly that's going to involve a bunch of touch points, and touch points in particular, this is looking at the example for the path of construction. So what are the touch points in relation to the path of construction? So detailed out 1 through 9 here in terms of some of the things that are required related to the path of construction, but to be able to look at it in terms of, here's the current state versus the target state. And then being able to use that as a way to come up with a mini phased implementation plan, our crawl, walk, run. What are my priorities here in terms of, is this something that we already do? Is it going to require change? Is it significant change? Is this a high priority for me, medium priority, et cetera? So it allows me to assess where I'm at from a current state to my target state and come up with my priorities to do an implementation. And that way I can knock things off one by one from not only from a IT perspective, but putting in place the processes related to that to monitor that and to ensure compliance. Everybody says they do AWP, very few actually do. This provides one of the tools. We have other tools within the CBA to look at it from a maturity matrix perspective. But this gives you a tool in which to see, okay, where am I at in the process here of adopting these value scenarios and these touch points that relate to this functionality to produce this sorts of outcomes. So these are the kind of the touch points and the value scenarios, capabilities assessment that help bring it all together and help form AWP implementations that have been used on a couple of, certainly on several projects. Our friends at within ConstructX have used this and perfected this, but there's several case studies that have taken advantage of this, including our friends at Dow. So at a kind of a summary level, from my experience, right, the top strengths and weaknesses within AWP, it's a structured process. For backwards planning effort, it has very defined deliverables, dedicated planners and resources with defined roles. It's been proven by Dow, Shell, ExxonMobil, and several owners and other EPCs have proven that it works, right? It's really, it's fairly well organized or easily understood and replicated in comparison to some of the lean techniques that we've seen. The integration framework is really a silo buster, right? It really serves as interface management. So when that work packaging process and framework along those lines ends up really being a tool that drives a level of collaboration. And of course, it aligns really well with the digital side of it. The weakness is it typically has to be owner driven to be really successful, right? And we still struggle with alignment with engineering and procurement to the path of construction, right? And we have no collaborative contracting, right? So there's not a lot of big emphasis within collaborative contracting within the AWP side of it. So we see that as a bit of a weakness and an area for improvement. And of course, there's poor visibility of vendor data, vendor work packages, and integrated materials management. And again, we're still building the digital threads and the data standards, but we're getting there. It's getting owners to enforce that within their supply chain and explaining that the right way that is a challenge. So at a high level, those are the case study and the strengths and weaknesses from my perspective. And with that, I can hand that over to Nigel to talk about the lean case study.
Okay, good evening from London. First, let me take the opportunity to congratulate you guys in the US on your astounding Ryder Cup success. Well done. We'll get you in 2 years. So what I'm going to touch on a lean case study that I've been involved in over the course of a decade or so. A little bit about me first. So I'm a civil engineer by training, work for a general contractor and a specialist contractor. And then for the last 15, 20 years, I've been implementing lean and general performance improvement stuff, predominantly now with clients. And there's a reason for that, which I'll get into in a minute. Okay, but that's kind of me. So I'm going to talk about work we've done with Anglian Water, who are one of the preeminent water companies in the UK. So water's privatized over here. And they set up a delivery arm called @ONE, which is an alliance of trades to go deliver their work for them. So I don't know, Eric, whether I can drive or not. Oops.
Sorry, I changed let me go back there.
Do you want to drive, Eric? It's fine, no problem.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Next one, please.
Sorry.
Thank you. There we go. So just a little bit first about how all this fits together. So Eric talked about the owner a little while ago and the need for that strong leadership. In our minds, a lot of what we do is about creating the right environment to allow lean implementations or performance improvement implementations to happen and occur. And we probably don't spend enough time as an industry actually understanding what that right environment looks like and understanding how we can make it better. But in our experience, it's a critical first step. Once you've got the right environment, then you can actually go and implement the right set of tools to do things differently. And I'll be very honest with you, I implement a lot of lean type tools and techniques, but I think the AWP stuff is fantastic. and we're implementing that with the clients at the moment alongside lean tools and techniques. So without giving the game away, I think there's a lot of commonality and a lot of crossover between sets of tools, but it is about creating that right environment to allow things to happen. And then once you've got that right environment, it's understanding from the kind of tool sets that are out there, whether it be DFMA or AWP. It's about understanding which are the right tools to implement to drive that client value. So that's really, really important, and hopefully this slide sets the context. Next one, please, Eric. So in terms of working with our customer, Anglian, it's very interesting. So one of the key things we understood from early doors of working with them is actually they have very clear goals as an infrastructure owner, as a supplier of water and wastewater services to the consumers. They understood exactly what they needed to do in terms of their business. And a lot of time was spent actually mirroring their goals across onto the delivery entity. So the goals were lined up. The main business wanted to reduce carbon. The delivery business wanted to reduce carbon. There was a desire to build things faster, and the delivery business replicated that to bring assets on stream quicker to allow the business to improve, because the business is measured against regulator outputs in terms of bang for the buck, in terms of delivery of assets. So deliverables lined up, and that actually forced a change in the way that they as a company contracted with their supply chain. So they realized they had to engage with their supply chain in a different way, in a much more collaborative and open way, and actually incentivize the supply chain to deliver the same drivers that they had as a business, which was basically make things go faster. Please deliver our assets cheaper. If we deliver our assets cheaper, we can actually build more assets. So it's a win-win. And that process took a while to explain to the supply chain and actually come together and co-create that. But that model was then formed where it actually genuinely became a win-win. So people were focused on actually delivering things faster and driving down cost, rather than finding the excuses to find change and driving cost up. So that environment is super, super critical. Additionally, the frameworks were initially with tier one suppliers. So there were a couple of the tier ones, I think you guys probably call them general contractors. A couple of those guys were installers too, so pipeline installers, that type of company. But then they drove the model down into the tier twos and threes. And I'll come on to that again in a little while longer. But that's really, really important. And a lot of time and effort was spent on incentivizing people to have the right behaviors. So across this framework of 5 companies, it was best person for the job was the mantra. So whichever program of works they're working in, they had 4 main programs and about 30 or 40 sub-programs. The best people for the job were picked from whichever organization, and they would deploy. And you ended up with blended teams all working for the best benefit of ultimately the client, but also themselves, because the drivers were lined up. Thanks, please, Eric. Next one. So I'm going to bring it live on one particular project just to talk for the next 5 minutes. So small project, but it was a Pathfinder we did a little while ago. And again, I'm not going to go through all the goals, but you'll see the goals are lined up again with the business goals. We've got targets on safety and time and cost, CO2, quality, etc. Next one, please, Eric. But then equally as important, we had some soft goals. So as a Pathfinder, as a prototype project, we were trying to show the way we needed to behave in the next phase of the framework. And this was about getting the tier twos fully engaged, making sure we had no man marking on the project. So we were actually just trying to get people in jobs, empower them, and allow them to actually do their jobs effectively. Do some stuff around 3D and 4D modeling, do some lean stuff, do some DFMA, engage with the procurement people, IPROP-T, and engage with the wider business in actually getting them to understand their asset in a bit more detail before they actually received it, so they could input into the process. And additionally, then following a typical gateway process, a better developed solution to demonstrate that it could be relatively painless, because there were some reservations about that. So what do we do? Thanks, Eric. So again, we talked a little bit about before, we created the right environment. We had collaborative plan per stage or collaborative planning meetings where we got people in the room, and I'll touch on that in a moment. The commercial model was refined some more. We had open book commercial discussions, really, really important. Let's focus on people driving down cost, not driving up value, and incentivize them to save money. We had the tier 2 stepping up because in my experience, whilst the GCs or the tier 1s have many talents, the actual knowledge for how you build things is down with those tier 2 guys. So we actually empowered those guys to step forward, come into the environment and give us their knowledge of how you build things and do things in a different way. Started to have some strategic business to business discussions with these tier 2s who were really keen to get involved and see their businesses develop closer to the client. And we did a lot of value stream mapping work and stuff to understand where the challenges might be in the project and understand where the blockers are, to understand what the buffers look like and what the stocks look like in the supply chain, the lead times, etc. Thank you. So we also then spent a lot of time before the project planning the project to death. You guys call it path of construction in the AWP world. We call it collaborative planning, all sorts of other terminology for it. But you see a workshop there on the right, a much slimmer version of me, where we spent 3 days in a hotel, actually using our 3D model to work through with the supply chain and the client how we're going to build this thing, and we iterated it until we came up what we thought was the right process for doing it. So all the time we're engaging with people, all the time we're getting the right people who are going to build this thing in the room and giving us their knowledge and their skills. And the focus was always on, let's move fast and let's drive this thing quicker, because we know if we go quicker, we can save money. And we also spent a lot of time working with the tier 1 guys to say, look, traditional contracting is about you guys being controlling and about putting people to work and controlling what they do. We need to change your role to become an enabler, to facilitate the environment, to allow people to do things in a better way. Okay, thank you, Eric. Next one, please. Our focus to drive costs down was to work with our friends at Bryden Wood, who are preeminent specialists in the whole DFMA world, to actually chunk the facility into pre-assembled bits and bring it to site and assemble it. So again, we engaged with the tier 2s and brought these guys together using our collaborative processes to actually input to that. And unbeknown to us, this is 5 years ago, we didn't know what AWP was at the time. We were actually doing caveman AWP, I call it. So we didn't know the processes, we didn't know the tools and technologies, but we were doing that chunking piece, and we were breaking things down to a day's work for a crew and then building them back up to more wider work packs. And we focused a lot on driving as much of the hours as we could off-site. I think we ended up achieving about 70% of the hours off-site. So we had considerable success in that regard. Thanks, Eric. We built, as Eric touched on before, technology-wise in AWP world, we built full 3D and 4D models. So the bottom picture there you can see is a sequencing piece where we iterated the sequence over and over again. We ran about, I think about 15 or 20 different sequences over the course of about 3 or 4 months until we perfected what we thought was the optimum way to build. And we got all the suppliers' input into that to figure out how we were going to do it. We put temporary works into it, and we started to create a product catalog out of this. So now where Anglian are at 1R is they have a full product catalog of 80% of their products they build across it's broadly, they spend 2 to 2.5 billion every 5 years. So they have 80% of that in the product catalog, and it's literally like going into an Amazon catalog and dragging and dropping stuff that's fully dimensioned, fully product literate behind it, and fully supply chain ratified. Thanks, Eric. Just gonna grab a sip. So what we also did was a fairly straightforward lean piece. We did first run studies. So we recognized, again with our friends at Bryden Wood, we recognized there were a couple of areas where we should really test what we're going to go do, because we were worried about tolerance fit and worried about how this is going to work on site. So we took way in advance, about 6 months in advance of hitting site, we took a piece of the structure that we were concerned about and we actually physically made it, and we physically put it together, and then we physically tried to install it in its own little piece in the factory, and we learned bucket loads. And the good news was we were able to reuse this piece once we'd made some adaptations from what we learned, reuse this piece in the finished product, and it probably saved us, I don't know, a couple of weeks on site in actually the learnings we had and not tripping over the problems we found. But then it drove us doing more first run studies on other areas of the project we were worried about. It was a really good proof of concept. And the good news was we were able to have multiple trades involved. So not just the steelwork guy, we had the M guy, we had the E guy, and we were able to build around that. So just a smart thing to do. Next, please, Eric. We did a bunch of last planner, mechanized last planner. So we did lots of collaborative planning sessions. We ran daily and weekly production planning sessions on site for the trades, and we were seeing very, very high reliability, 70 to 80% over the course of the project, which is where we were able to hit our time opportunities. And we took the learning from the process, the plan, do, check, act process. We took the check stuff back into the model to learn for the next time and understand where we were deficient in terms of the processes on site. As Eric talked about the 80% Deming model there, you know, it isn't about people. I'm passionate about it. In my experience, very, very few people in my career have ever come to work to do a poor job. People want to come to work and be busy through the day and achieve. And if you give them some tools and some opportunities to check in and learn and act, they generally, in my experience, grasp it, and they're a lot happier in their work processes. So we did a lot of the lean planning stuff, and it was a benchmark for how they moved on to doing this stuff on projects moving forward. Thanks, Eric. And lastly, this is one of the softest wins, but the biggest wins, engaging the final end users. So what we found working with the end users were, you know, they were used to having to try and decipher multiple 2D drawings. Once we were able to show them visualizations of the plant and visualizations of the model, the input we got back from them was great. We used the technology to paint pictures, in my view, for people who are not builders. And they were able to say, hang on a minute, that walkway shouldn't be up there, it should be over there. Why don't we move the lighting over there? Why don't we have the test point just up a bit at hand height rather than down here? So all that good stuff came in before we hit site, and actually, you know, we're able to do fairly interactive sign-offs. So just a lot of really good engaging stuff. Thanks, Eric. So that were our targets. Hit it again, please. Great stuff. We hit them all, except one, and that was driving the behavioral change in tier 1. So what we struggled with, and you know, I'll just be really honest because it's the way I am, is getting the GC in that instance to change from being a controller to facilitator. They struggled with it. They really struggled, and really struggled with the concept of having to change the way they do things. To be fair, now 5 years downstream, they're in a much better place, and they've made that facilitative change. But at the point that was the challenge we had. Okay, thanks, Eric. I think it's strengths and weaknesses, yeah. So again, quickly for me, collaboration. I think the collaborative contracts piece is huge, and I think the whole concept of lean is coming together for the benefit of the end user or the customer to improve things. I think that's kind of a DNA thing. Planning wise, yeah, it's pretty rigorous, the planning process. It's very good, and there is a huge focus on making work ready and forcing that last planner, the last guy putting people to work, to help him and facilitate his constraint removal. It's good integration with lots of other tools, DFMA, 4D, 5D modeling. There's a good set of improvement tool sets. I haven't talked about them too much, but we did some process improvement work on site, and there's good transparency and alignment. So really, that I can't emphasize that enough, that getting organizations and people to focus on a common goal that's benefit to all of them is really, really critical. In my opinion, some of the weaknesses, the language, the whole poka-yoke kinds, and again, the whole Japanese thing can be intimidating to people. The structure is probably not as structured as the AWP stuff that I'm just learning about. Additionally, it's really, really important, but oftentimes the WIFM's not there. So what's in it for me? So owners get it and want it. Tier 1s generally see lean as a threat, and they kind of play at it a little bit and sort of manage that whole success piece, the message. But it's actually, if you commit, the opportunities are boundless. And also complexity. Lean's perceived as complex. It's probably linked to the language, when actually it's pretty simple. It's about ensuring flow. It's about making work ready. So hopefully that's been a little bit illuminating into my world, and I think we're on to questions, Eric. Yeah. Oh, we got a bit of wrap up first, I think. Sorry. Yep.
Okay, so in terms of bringing it all together, and kind of, you know, I think we're more aligned, or collectively we, Nigel and I, think we're more aligned than antithetical, right? So can't we all just get along, right? So I think that this represents things in terms of rather than chasing the conflict, can we get along and raise the water for everybody here? You know, and then the other, you know, when we were creating this presentation together, Nigel said, look, I view this as a Venn diagram, right? So you got AWP and Lean coming together. And, you know, we got these two different camps that, you know, sometimes are, you know, pointing fingers and saying mine's better than yours, or, you know, hey, you know, get off of my cloud sort of thing. Right? But, you know, and the reality is that if we get past the buzzwords and the camps that divide us, and we're able to focus on the capabilities and the functionality necessary to realize these value scenarios, I think we can take it to another level, right? So it's there's a lot of good stuff to be had here, and so that's what we're after here, is to get to the good stuff and to bring these communities together in a meaningful way. In doing that, you had heard earlier that some of this is really working with the joint working group and continuing the SWOT. I think you know, we need to come to grips in terms of understanding each other's language and acronyms, right? There's so many of them. You know, Nigel referenced, he's just learning AWP, and you know, I'm still learning Lean, various techniques and acronyms there throughout his presentation. I'm like, what is that? So, but you know, we're gonna work towards a practitioner white paper. We're gonna look for joint educational opportunities, and hopefully we can advance the ball here with doing some funded research together to really look at what's the differences, what's the strengths, and how do we create a more optimal project delivery type of approach going forward here. So, you know, come share your passion to build the future of construction. And with that,
Let's all get along.
Open it up for Q&A here.
Yeah, as a process check, my Slido's not working. So I don't know if we're going to use the chat room to. Oh, here we go. It's working here. Not for me though.
All right.
All right.
So, is organizational adoption of either methodology a challenge? How about at the project level, asking from a strengths and weaknesses perspective? Nigel, you want to kick off on that?
Yeah, it is. It is definitely a challenge. But I keep coming back to it. It's about that ability to create the right environment. If we can get people in the right environment with their goals all lined up, and that takes away so much, it just makes life simple. Then it's just a people issue, and you either change the people or change the people. So it's about creating that environment first, and then people, in my experience, mostly generally fall into line then, because they just want to get on and do a good job and collaborate.
Excellent. Well, on the organizational side of it, for years and years, I went around the world telling everybody 10% technology, 90% sociology. With the advent of technology, maybe that's changed to more 20% technology, 90% sociology, but it's still a huge people component and organizational challenge. Getting people to change and adopt new things and take on new responsibilities and accountabilities is never the easy part. The technology part's the easier part out of all that. But at a project level, you know, what we see is the need to get down to role and have specific. So if I'm the materials manager on this project during this phase, I need to be able to understand, you know, what I need to be doing on there. And so it often requires some level of role-based training and education. And so again, the educational aspects, really, really important.
There's a couple of quick ones I can pick up at the bottom there if you want, Eric. One's just jumped off. I think it was from John Strickland about best person for the task. Yeah, I think generally best person for the task. Oh, there you go at the top. Thank you. Best person for the task. Yeah, I think it's a function of generally people emerge who once you explain what you're looking for, you can zone in on people pretty easily, and people kind of emerge who have the right talents. But also what we found is actually when you make it everybody's problem, so like the five businesses within the allowance, you make it all their issue to solve the problems, then they look into their own organization, say, actually we'll pick this guy up and we'll put him over there in somebody else's organization if that's the best thing to do. So it's kind of about getting the aligned goals put together first is key. And then the other one, the contracting model, about getting the tier 2s developed so early. So we use a contract over here called the NEC contract. There's various types of it, but the one we used was a pretty collaborative model, which is all about frameworks. It's all about paying people for their involvement up front on a consultancy basis to get involved and help give their best knowledge without any guarantee of work downstream. But the basis is, look, come and play, give us really good ideas. If we like what you give us, then we'll give you more work downstream. And it's kind of like a very open, very collaborative piece. And people are willing to invest if there's a good chance they'll get work downstream. Hopefully picked up 2 in 1 there, Eric.
All right. This one here, if AWP has to be owner driven, does it mean it might not work and a self-driven EPC contractor runs the method? No, absolutely not. I think it just gets better when you have the owner actually drives it. So it can be done, and there is a number of EPCs and engineers, even our friends in Fort Bacon and Davis, that are doing a great job in terms of engineering compliance with AWP. But there's folks that drive this on their own. It gets a whole lot better when you get the owner driving it and putting it into the contracts, and there's alignment throughout the supply chain.
Okay. I'll go to the next one. Well, is it possible to compare the role of the work-based planner with the last planner? Absolutely. I think in my mind that they're the last people who put people to work, and really, you're spending big money when you're at the coalface and you're putting crews to work. So you need that planning to be absolutely right, and you need to make ready to be absolutely right. And I think in my mind, from what I understand of the work-based planner, it's a very similar role as that last planner in Lean. It's about, that the plan, do, check, act piece. It's about committing that resource and then figuring out how well we did and what can we learn and improve for the next time. I don't know, Eric, if you're the same opinion, but certainly I think there's lots of
I think that's, historically there's been the divide between the last planner and work-based planner in terms of who actually does creates the actual work packages and the plans, the detailed plans, with the Lean community saying that needs to be the foreman that owns that out in the field. And, on the AWP side of it, it's certainly the foreman that needs to be accountable for it. But what we've recognized is that there's a bit of a need to have support the foreman out in the field, so you can take away some of the tedious work that's necessary there to clear a path for them to be able to supervise their crew. So I think that's been the divide between the two camps, largely on the last planner side of it. But there's, when you start peeling back that, and uncovering the mystery of it, it makes some level of sense that, okay, we need to make sure the foreman is held accountable for this and owns it, right? And then, but how do we take that, some of the level of work and effort that it takes to get there in terms of doing the work packaging and the constraint analysis? How can we take some of that burden away from the last planner and make their life easier, so it's catering to them out in the field? So perhaps there's a blended approach that we're going to study going forward to see what makes the most sense here.
Do you want to pick
and it might not be one size fits all either, right?
Do you want to take the next one? No one's perfect, rather pre-qualification strategies that lead to higher levels of success. Do you want to take that one?
Go ahead.
I said, do you want to take it, Eric?
No one's perfect, but there are pre-qualifications that lead to higher levels of success. There are, at least on our side, in terms of, there's been a considerable amount of effort within the AWP community of business advancement and our performance and benchmarking folks in order to really address the levels of maturity along those lines. And to, you know, look at it in terms of progressively getting better in terms of you're here, you want to get here. And, you know, here's the different dimensions that one would want to assess and measure yourself upon along those lines.
I think from my perspective, yes, there are pre-qual strategies you can adopt, and you can gauge whether people have the right collaborative style, etc. But also, I think just getting tier 2s and tier 3s to the table will improve things. Getting the guys with the knowledge of how you build at a detailed level as early as possible into the process, you will get a better outcome. Absolutely no question. Could you please elaborate more on supply chain adoption and integrated material management weaknesses? Thank you. So in terms of supply chain adoption, for me, I guess, I think, again, I hate to be boring, but going back to that whole creating the environment piece is really important to allow supply chains to come on board. I definitely think in the lean world, we're not as big into material management as what I've understood the AWP world is. I don't know, Eric, you want to pick up on that one?
Yeah, in terms of the supply chain adoption within, right now, we don't do a good enough job, at least on the AWP side of it, in terms of vendor work packages, vendor documentation, and managing of that, and really bringing in the supply chain into the mix from the equipment providers and managing that. Integrated materials management being coming from engineering into the procurement, and then also taking into account the logistics, what's arrived on site, and where it's at in the laydown yards, and the managing of that in terms of trial allocations to the work packages. So we have not done, there's more work to be done there in terms of management of vendor work packages, equipment work packages, integrated materials management side of it. It's just still an area that needs further development and build out of that in terms of the where we're at in terms of linking things together and having visibility over the supply chain. That still tends to be the Achilles heel of projects, is vendor documentation.
I'm going to cherry pick a question, Eric, because I really like it. In both methodologies, collaboration is essential. How can this be promoted in an environment where owners and contractors are not value stream driven? So I guess in my head, oops, where did that one go? Thanks, Steve. I guess in my head, I think if you align the goals between the owner and the supply chain as best you can, I appreciate it's not that straightforward always, but if you can align the goals, people will get to that value stream view eventually. But aligning the goals will drive collaboration because you're pushing for the same thing, which is go faster and drive down cost. And in my experience of working with the tier 1s and tier 2s, there has to be a trade-off there that actually if you go faster and drive down cost, then we're going to build more and we'll give you more work because you're one of the good guys, you're helping us to improve. And I think they'll get to that value stream piece if you start them on that journey. So that's my view. Do you want to pick a favorite question, Eric, to finish? Got 2 minutes.
Yeah, how do we get procurement, supply chains, and 40 trade contractors integrated under AWP? Shorter answer is you need to have the dedicated planners, but you also need to link this together from an IT perspective and the digital threads and the data requirements in order to really bring those different trade contractors into the picture and offer a level of visibility where they're at with the plan, do, check with that process and the whole constraints. So the way you get these folks integrated is you mandate it from into the contract, you explain it to them, you do the workshops, you say, this is the data, this is why I need this data, this is the level of work packaging, this is the constraints that you're going to be measured against, and to enforce that onto a project. That's how you get the trade contractors on board with this and being able to have a level of visibility in terms of where they're at with planning their work, where they're at with the constraints. Is it done? You know, and being able to pull that in.
So can I just take the opportunity? Brilliant questions. Thank you. Thank you for all you guys who made the effort to put the questions in, and hopefully we've got our messages across today. That I think, Eric, we both agree there's more in common than we have differences. Yeah.
Absolutely. So look
Awesome.
forward to bringing the communities together and continuing this effort.
Really great job.
Yeah, thank you both. I love the image of the zebra and the lion, and that should have been our icon for the entire summit.
That's Eric.
I had a lot of fun creating this presentation.
That was great. So guess what? It is now time we get an hour break. It's lunchtime for a good solid group of us, at least on the phone or on the summit. So take an hour, be back at 1:30 Central Time, and we'll see you then for our next session, which will be industrialized modularization. See you then.
Thank you.